Welcome to the Awesemo MMA strategy show for UFC Vegas number 35. Of course, I am Jason Floyd. As always, I am joined by the fighter Pete Rogers Jr. here to break down Saturday's UFC Fight Night card that will take place inside the UFC Apex. Going to be headlined by a Striker's Delight matchup between Edson Barboza and Giga Chikadze. I know Pete's excited for this one because this is right up Pete's alley with the two strikers that you have there. In terms of this matchup, of course, we are sponsored by Monkey Knife Fight. We'll talk a little bit about Monkey Knife Fight later on in the show. Also, you got to check out the brand new college football podcast that we have here at Awesemo, as college football week 0 starts this weekend, and we have got you covered with our brand new college football podcast. Betting You, Ben Ross and Matt Jajeski take you through each conference and the best bets on the board. Betting You is available now wherever you get your podcast, with new episodes dropping on Wednesday. I'm a huge college football fan, so looking forward to week 0 and then week 1 next weekend, Labor Day weekend. Of course, by the way, just throw a little programming announcement out there. I will not be here once again on Saturday for Live for Lock, as I got a Buccaneers Radio Network broadcast, so I will not be able to do Live for Lock here. But I am here for the next hour for the strategy show. Of course, as always, I'm joined by the fighter Pete Rogers Jr. Pete, by the way, apparently for people who are not following Pete on Instagram, you would know Pete's been he's been hard at work outside cleaning up from the storm last week. So how are we doing in terms of getting everything cleaned up, man?
My goodness, man, we got smoked up here by the hurricane. Not so much for like the surrounding towns and areas, but like our house and property in particular. Like we had numerous trees fall down and take out the power lines, rip the lines out of the house. I just got cable and internet. I think it was yesterday. It's been a process, man. And then chopping up the wood and just kind of cleaning up the whole yard and, damaged it. And there was a lot of damage, but it could have been a lot worse, right? Like it could have smoked the house or taken out our cars. But yeah, I mean, you Florida boys are comfortable and used to those hurricanes, but, up here, I just feel like we're unprepared in regards to that. But, things could always be worse, but I'm happy to be able to do this show. I didn't know if I was going to be able to. And looking at this card, Jason, this card's pretty exciting, right? Like the main event's pretty exciting. I really like the main event. It's a Striker's Delight, as you put it. And I do think that there are some interesting spots to target on this, fight card. Some relatively low level if you really want to like put it in comparison to other cards. But I think this is going to be a very nice DFS slate.
And I will tell you, there is one fight in terms of the Monkey Knife Fight props out there that has already stuck out to me. And I think it's something that you do got to take advantage of. Of course, if you do have any questions on the fight, leave those right now in the YouTube chat. Also over in our premium MMA Slack channel, we'll get to those questions throughout the show. Of course, if you're new to Awesemo, be sure to subscribe to Awesemo right here on YouTube. Got a ton of great shows for you each and every day. Of course, coming up after us will be MLB Deeper Dive and MLB Live for Lock, as the guys will get you ready for tonight's MLB action. Of course, if you're not an Awesemo subscriber and you want to get a little peek of what is behind the paywall, today's free premium tools and data are MLB main slate ownerships. If you're looking to take that plunge to become an Awesemo Plus member, you got to check out that free premium content we have over there to help develop your MLB lines. With Pete, let's get right into this main event. Striker's Delight, I think, is about the best way to put this one. Edson Barboza and Giga Chikadze, and it's your favorite salary fight, 8,200, 8,000. Edson Barboza is the 8,200 fighter, 8,000 for Chikadze. Over on FanDuel, $19 for Barboza, $18 for Chikadze. And, one of the things I always like to write down is some of the prop bets that I like in terms of this card. And ones that really stuck out to me in terms of this one is the fight going the distance. Barboza wins via decision plus 300. Chikadze wins via decision plus 400. I truly do feel that this is a fight that we're going to see go out over 25 minutes. I don't think the stoppage is coming in this one.
It's an interesting point, and I think I might agree with you. Based on their defensive ability as well. Yes, they're prolific offensive strikers, but Edson Barboza 59% striking defense, Giga Chikadze lower sample size, but around 60% for striking defense. But just in general, styles make fights, and I do think that these guys are going to be a little bit more selective with their shots. And in addition to being selective, they're going to have an opponent that can answer their combinations or start to counter off of some of those. So I will say that I feel like this could be like a tit for tat type of fight where, they throw a combination and, they go back and forth with it. And we're going to be left scratching our heads saying, man, this is a really close fight and a lot closer than probably, what the line is suggesting. I know that a lot of people, including myself, like Edson Barboza in the fight. I mean, how can you not? He has the more solid resume. He's the more well-rounded fighter. He's fought the legitimate competition. Giga Chikadze, super dangerous, excellent kicks, good kicks to the body, tricky left leg of his, which is, it displays his, excellent kicking dexterity where he's able to flip, that leg, any which way he wants. He digs that ball of his foot into the liver, which is a little bit different. And I've seen some people going back and forth on Twitter saying, it's just a liver kick. Well, it's really not just a liver kick because it's not a roundhouse to the liver. When he plants that kick into the liver, he's hitting with the front ball. So when he's hitting you with the ball of his foot, it's similar to a front kick to the body, but the angle of it is coming like a round kick. So that's why he's calling it the Giga kick. In general, I do favor Edson Barboza in the fight based on the salary. It's going to be tough to get away from, and you're going to be left plugging one of these guys into your lineups. I'm expecting around 90 points or so. I'm not really, I'm tempering expectations a little bit, but I am siding with Edson Barboza in the fight. I think that he can do enough. His experience will shine through. But let me tell you, an upset in this fight, based on the stylistic matchup, really wouldn't surprise me.
I like what you said there, temperaturing your expectations in terms of how many points could get scored in this one, because, if this is a fight that is just 25 minutes of a kickboxing matchup, there's no takedowns, no knockdowns, that's going to kind of limit what that final score could be. I did find it interesting over on Monkey Knife Fight, the total strikes for this one in terms of the number that's out there right now, Edson Barboza, 119.5. What was the interesting part of that one? I think that's a very accurate number. Yeah, I think you're probably going to be somewhere in that range. But for Giga, it was 66.5, which I thought was a pretty low number for a fight that I do expect to go 25 minutes or so. I mean, I think it's just a matter of, how much of do we see Barboza with the leg kicks? I mean, I think that to me is really the big thing in terms of this one. And I'm like you, I think this is a fight that because of salary, you got to be circling this fight as saying this is one of those fights that you have to have maximum exposure to.
Yeah, and because of the stylistic matchup, I probably wouldn't want to have so much, but because of the price, I'm like lured into it a little bit more than I would typically be. I do think that, Edson Barboza at 145 pounds looks amazing. I do worry about maybe a cut to such a low weight class possibly affecting his durability, but I can't really say that until we've seen it. I do really like Edson Barboza. 8,200 is my lean in the fight. But it's just the strength of schedule, right? And how close some of Giga Chikadze's early fights were. Yes, he's on back-to-back KO wins. He got a nice knockout over Cub Swanson, showed off that excellent kick to the body. But prior to that, had some close decisions in the UFC. And let's be real, if Edson Barboza mixes in some takedowns, it's not going to be a close fight. I like Edson Barboza, from the boxing, the kickboxing, in the clinch. I'm siding with him in the fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's A, the pricing, but B, also the fact that this is scheduled for 25 minutes of why I feel in terms of DFS that you got to go there. Of course, we'll give our straight up picks later on in the show, but to me, this is a very close fight. And Giga is a fighter who he's been trying to get this type of fight. There's a lot of guys that maybe necessarily don't want to sign to fight him because of what he can do from the stand-up range, but I think it's a very close fight here. I will have exposure to both of these guys. It's one of those situations. I mean, this is full disclosure. The fact that, I've got a broadcast on Saturday night, I won't have a ton of lineups. That's where I rely on Pete. Say, Pete, if you're a really good friend, you will text me if there's a change and I need to make some quick changes to some lineups.
Absolutely. And, we lucked out last week and, hopefully we can keep it going with no cancellations or dropouts or anything like that, anything crazy. So, yeah, definitely smash exposure to this fight.
Now, of course, this card is going to feature the finals for this season's Ultimate Fighter. The co-main event, we've got Brian Battle taking on Gilbert Urbina. Battle 8,600, Urbina 7,600. Of course, Urbina stepping in for the injury to Tresean Gore in this one. Battle did kind of talk about it. He said, we had plenty of time of knowing, in the change here. He says there's a little bit of a change, but not too much of a change. In terms of both these guys, and look, when I look at all of this season of the Ultimate Fighter. I mean, I think we're talking about, these are all fighters who, I mean, look, they're regional prospects in terms of this one. But what's your talk on Battle and Urbina?
Yeah, I think that Brian Battle will probably be a very chalky play. 8,600. He's not really priced up too much. He has somewhat of a late replacement in Urbina stepping in. I think it would have been a completely different fight if Tresean Gorse was in this fight, but he's not, obviously. And I think that 8,600 in the mid range, I'm okay with getting to him. And I think that he could possibly stop Urbina. On the Ultimate Fighter, you did see Urbina get dropped numerous times in the Gore matchup where he was dropped with a jab in a couple sequences. The durability is in question, but why I will say the path to victory for Urbina is implementing takedowns and trying to nullify that decently strong striking of Brian Battle, put him on the mat and look to submit him, similar to how Brian Battle lost his lone pro fight where he was submitted via armbar. I do think that Urbina has a path to victory, a guy that has a ton of submissions on his record. And, it's going to be tough sledding. It really is. I think he's going to be trying to implement takedowns early, trying to, stay away from the dangerous Brian Battle at range. But I'm siding with Brian Battle in the matchup. Outside of a contrarian approach, Urbina is going to be a guy that I'm not going to have too much exposure to. I think just the price, everything makes too much sense for Battle at 8,600.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that one in terms of Battle. 17-13 over on FanDuel, so you got to pay a little bit up for Brian Battle. I mean, this is my only concern when we're talking about these Ultimate Fighter fights is, it's kind of before the Ultimate Fighter, kind of some of the level of competition that they were facing. That to me is a little bit of concern in talking about having so much trust for them to put them in my lineups.
Yeah, if you don't want to overthink it, right? Like, I think a pretty smart approach would be, have exposure to the underdog in any of these Ultimate Fighter fights, right? Like, having exposure to the underdog, because at the grand scheme of things, this is somewhat low level in comparison to what we're used to. And all it takes is one round or one moment in a round for these guys to really turn the tide of the fight. And you see it often in Ultimate Fighter, how many people have to, they can come from behind and pull it off, or who has the better cardio, or who gets clipped with a shot. So I'm totally with you there, but it's Brian Battle for me in this matchup.
Then we've got the Bantamweight final between Ricky and Brady. Ricky 8,700, Brady 7,500. Ricky Turcos is a guy that has really been around the scene for a while. It was always kind of a win or two. You thought he was going to get into the UFC, so now he's 8,700 over on DraftKings, $18 on FanDuel. I have some people kind of talking about maybe Brady is one of those underdogs to target this week.
Yeah, and it's a great point, right? Like, in regards to the Brian Battle Urbina fight or the Ricky Turcios Brady Highstand fight, I will probably have more exposure to Brady Highstand, the underdog in this matchup. And the reason for it is the DraftKings scoring system, right? We're always talking about, targeting those strong wrestlers with good grappling, or strong wrestlers with, good takedowns and good top control. And that's Brady Highstand, really. That's going to be his game, is going to get into face of Ricky Turcios, close that distance, pin him against the cage, work on relentless takedowns, mat returns at times. And I will say that Ricky Turcios is dangerous on the feet, very dangerous on the feet. But from a DraftKings standpoint, right, I think outside of a submission win, I don't think he'll TKO, Brady Highstand. Turcios has some really good BJJ. But I think that's how at 8,700 he's going to be able to pay off that price tag. But Brady Highstand really doesn't have to do a lot at 7,500, especially if he gets some takedowns and conceal some rounds. On the Ultimate Fighter, you did see Turcios get taken down in a couple of his fights. And I look at Brady Highstand as some guy, like, he's a dark horse for the show, where I'm like, man, I can't believe that he's as strong. You know what I mean? You don't realize how strong somebody is until you watch him in a fight, and you're like, okay, that's how I can gauge it. And it just seems like he's a little bit overwhelming for his opponents. And at 7,500, I want exposure to Brady Highstand. I'm siding with Brady Highstand in the matchup, especially for DraftKings because of the scoring. But if Ricky, Turcios keeps his fight on the feet, I definitely can see him, kind of outlasting him and outpointing him from the outside.
Of course, fantasy football season is here, and the Awesemo Fantasy Football Draft Kit is now available for season-long and best ball fantasy leagues. The same projections, tools, analysis we use for NFL DFS goes into this package, which includes our Draft Wingman. I will tell you, I used the Draft Wingman last year to help develop my teams, and I highly recommend taking advantage of this. Also, it includes our best ball ranking, stacking guide, trade value chart, and so much more. And you'll also receive up to $35 credit for underdog and FFPC leagues. You can get this package for 33% off when you use the promo code WR at checkout. That's less than $10 for everything we have to offer for season long and best ball. Just click the link in the description of this video to activate that offer. I can highly recommend that Draft Wingman. It's something that I used last year to develop my lineups. I mean, look, there's certain teams in this league, I know them up and down. They're the NFC South teams, but sometimes I need a little help about, especially those AFC teams. I really don't pay too much attention to because of my focus is so much centered around the Bucks and the NFC South. So you got to take advantage of that fantasy football draft kit that we have here at awesemo.com. Let's move on next up to a welterweight matchup between Kevin Lee and Daniel Rodriguez. Kevin Lee 8,500, Daniel Rodriguez 7,700. Of course, Kevin Lee was initially supposed to be taking on Sean Brady in this spot. Of course, Sean Brady pulled out due to an injury. And Pete, the thing that stuck out to me that I just coming in when, this fight was announced and I was doing some prep here for the show, I just thought Daniel Rodriguez has got to have a size advantage in this one. And that's not the case when we're talking about reach. I was really surprised by that stat.
Yeah, I was surprised by it as well because, you think about Kevin Lee coming from the lightweight division and, having, a couple fights at welterweight. But I do think that he's, a lightweight that cut a tremendous amount of weight. And maybe this is a home for him here. I mean, he's kind of like making that the case. But I will say that I think that Daniel Rodriguez is going to be a big guy, for him to fight. And I'm interested in this matchup. And I view this fight as a must roster fight, in my opinion. I feel like I can see this going either way, where Kevin Lee looks like the Kevin Lee of old, implements some strong takedowns and some good top pressure and tries to work towards a finish. We've seen Kevin Lee look tremendous at times, right? But we've also seen that cardio liability where it really drops off a cliff. And that's where I'm like pausing with picking Kevin Lee in this matchup, because I do feel like, he's coming off of a lot of adversity, right? Like he's just having to come off of some surgeries, a layoff. You're talking about, now at a higher weight class. For me, right, I feel like he was a dominant force at lightweight because he was a strong guy at that weight class. And his volume's concerning for me as well, because I do feel like Daniel Rodriguez, his output is excellent for the division in terms of striking. If Daniel Rodriguez keep it on the feet, I mean, based on the small sample size in the UFC, Daniel Rodriguez 8.07 strikes per minute, whereas Kevin Lee's 3.9. That's a pretty big difference. That's nearly 2-1. And I will say that, Kevin Lee needs to implement takedowns, but it's going to be some tough sledding at times because Daniel Rodriguez works back to his feet, 83% takedown defensive rating. Styles make fights. Kevin Lee's really, really strong, but Daniel Rodriguez is threatening standing up and striking, but also when Kevin Lee gets tired, Daniel Rodriguez has some slick submissions. So I don't know, maybe I'm just out of the Kevin Lee business personally, but for DFS, I have to have exposure to him because of his wrestling pedigree and his style, because if he can go out there and mix in several takedowns in a decision or finish, I mean, we're talking about a guy that could break the slate here.
Samuel, appreciate you in the super chat. We'll get to your super chats at the end of the show like usual. I mean, look, this is the thing. Kevin Lee, there are times that, look, he looks like an elite guy, and the move up to welterweight was just a fact of just making 55 it was too tough for him. Mm-hmm. Daniel Rodriguez is a 10th planet jiu-jitsu guy, so I think if he does utilize wrestling in this matchup, I think that has got to be, you got to watch yourself if you take that one on the ground, of what potentially Daniel Rodriguez could do on the mat. Look, there's a lot of unknowns. Kevin Lee, because of the injuries, he had a brief retirement, and now he's coming out of retirement. And look, I think that he probably looks at Chiesa moving up to 170 and saying, okay, if he could do it, I could do it. But this is one where I will tell you, I'm going to sprinkle some Daniel Rodriguez in there as one of the, we always talk about those fighters you're going to put in your pool that are underneath 8,000, those underdogs that you say, let me throw him in there because I think he has a chance to get in there. But if Kevin Lee does utilize his wrestling, man, that could lead to a monster DFS score.
It definitely can. And I understand if you're looking at like box scores or whatnot, Mike Perry took down Daniel Rodriguez 2 out of 4 times. Tim Means took down Daniel Rodriguez 1 out of 3 times. So I fully expect Kevin Lee to take down Daniel Rodriguez. But in each of those fights, we've seen Daniel Rodriguez work back to his feet, and he has decent cardio, pretty good cardio. I think he has better cardio than Kevin Lee, the high volume. And after round 1, Kevin Lee gets less and less dangerous. So for me, I'm a little different. A little bit different on this matchup, and I feel like I'm siding more with Daniel Rodriguez. So I will be more aggressive than you with Daniel Rodriguez, and definitely including some Kevin Lee in my pools. But I think that he could pull off the upset here, man. He's been the more active guy lately. Yes, his strength of schedule is nowhere near Kevin Lee, but I do think that Daniel Rodriguez possesses skills to get this done.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the things of I want to look at those weigh-ins tomorrow. What does Kevin Lee look like on the scale at 170 pounds as opposed to what we saw in there at 155 pounds? Next up, we got a matchup of, once again, these are 2 fighters that competed on this season of the Ultimate Fighter, Andre Petroski and Michael Gilmore. Gilmore, I thought, said something really interesting to the media yesterday. He said, it was last Tuesday that he got the call for this one. He said, I was taking a nap, and he goes, normally I'm taking a nap, I see a number I don't recognize, I just don't even pay attention to it. He goes, but for some reason I decided I should pick it up. Well, it was Mick Maynard on the phone offering his fight. And he said, look, Mick didn't even tell me who the fighter was. He didn't tell me if he was at 70 or 85. I just said yes. And he said, so this is the matchup here. Petroski, a huge betting favorite. I want to say he's the second highest betting favorite on this card behind Muradov. And I do like Petroski in this fight. It's a huge price tag in terms of the betting lines over on DraftKings. He's $9,200, $22 on FanDuel. I do like Petroski in this spot, though.
Yeah, I really like Andre Petroski here in this matchup against Michael Gilmore. These guys are relatively low level. We talk about it because it is the Ultimate Fighter. But from what I've seen from Andre Petroski, honestly, I've been actually pretty impressed. Outside of him, losing on the Ultimate Fighter, I thought that he has a good game, really, really good wrestling. He's very aggressive, good submission game, good top game. It's just cardio might be a liability here. So if somebody's able to prevent takedowns and kind of just, prevent a few takedowns and make him work, that high work rate might actually fatigue Andre Petroski. But I don't think that Michael Gilmore can do that in this matchup. Gilmore is probably the better striker of the two, comes from a striking background. But I think that the price range, $9,200 for Petroski, I think it's warranted. I really do. I think that he can get at least one takedown and work towards a finish. It might be an early finish. It might be within, 2.5 rounds where he can actually accumulate some stats. So 9,200, I really like Petroski. Gilmore's probably one of the most contrarian picks on the entire slate. I don't have much interest in him, to be honest. And I just think that this is a stylistic match, stylistic nightmare for him. Petroski, 9,200, one of my favorite fighters on the slate.
He was actually, when this season of the Ultimate Fighter started, Petroski was one of those guys I was kind of circling and saying, I think this is a guy I potentially look forward to moving forward. And obviously both these guys they know they're in a situation where the likely scenario is when you stay in the UFC, lose, you're probably back to the regional scene. And Gallimore, even without saying it, he understands what's on here. Then next up, we got the other biggest favorite on this card. You got Muradov taking on Meerschaert. Muradov, 9,300, 6,900 for Gerald Meerschaert. Look, I'm not saying I'm picking Gerald Meerschaert in this fight because I'm not. However, there is a extremely juicy prop out there. If Gerald Meerschaert's winning this fight, the likelihood is he's winning this fight via submission. Pete, I'm seeing as high as 10-1 Gerald Meerschaert to win by submission. And I know I was watching Bilal Muhammad's show about within like the last 2 or 3 weeks, and he had said, he's like, look, Gerald Meerschaert, he goes, it just hasn't translated from the gym to fight night. And I think where I'm going with this one is where he is unbelievable in the gym. It just hasn't correlated on fight night in the UFC.
Yeah, I get that, man. I've struggled with that. I think every fighter struggles with that to a point where you want to really showcase your full potential. It's very difficult to be, you know, at the top of your game under the bright lights when it means the most. And some people underperform under the lights, and some people overperform. A guy like Clay Guida, notoriously bad in the gym, amazing under the lights. It's just amazing how this sport is. I will say that this matchup, I really like Mahmoud Muradov in this fight. He's a big favorite, but I do think that he's a great play. 9,300. He packs a big punch, and Mearshart has been, knocked out. You think about what happened against Ian Heinisch and then against Chimaev. Yes, he caught a submission against Fabinski, but on the feet, it's going to be, it's going to be very difficult for him to, land shots and avoid getting knocked down against Muradov. He needs to implement takedowns immediately, try to smother Muradov against the cage. But Muradov has good wrestling as well. So for me, I agree with you completely. If Gerald Mearshart pulls this off somehow, it's from finding the neck of Muradov, who has been submitted from a guillotine like 8 years ago. So, there is a path there. So at 10-1, it's definitely warranted. But for me, it's Muradov, 9,300. I like it. Just, be careful, because he could stay on the outside and just be a sniper and pick apart Mearshart, which doesn't really translate towards, DFS. This is a much better betting opportunity where, like, you put Muradov in there as like a parlay piece, just to kind of boost up your totals and all this and that. But I will say for 9,300 DFS, maybe he's, a little bit better over on the FanDuel platform, where he's going to have to stuff some takedowns.
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking that as you were talking, is when we're talking about those $20 and up options over on FanDuel, those fighters that you feel pretty confident that, they're going to win 7, 8, 9 out of 10 times. He is someone I think you have to look at, because the likelihood is he's going to have to stop takedowns, because that is a clear path to Gerald Mearshart winning this fight, making it a grappling matchup, probably making it an ugly fight against the fence. You mentioned about the, in terms of, if you're going to add Muradov as a parlay piece, I don't want to get to the minus 630. That's just so high. I'm looking at trying to find maybe one of those props, via TKO. Maybe look at the decision prop is there in terms of adding him as a parlay piece. But to me, Gerald Mearshart, if he is going to win this matchup, it's him submitting Muradov.
100%, right? Like, for me, that's how I think it's going to go. And it's kind of funny, right? Where we talk about these high, these fighters with some high odds, that adding them to parlay pieces, that it could actually end up being a nightmare. I had a pretty big parlay, and I think it was like 6 or 7 leg, and I had Logan Storley, and on the book that I go with, it's like he was like a minus 4,000 favorite or something crazy like that. I believe it was minus 4,500, and he damn near blew that fight for me, Jason. And it just goes to show you it's not worth it sometimes, where you have to just target these closer odds, and that's where things can get tough. But for me, it's Muradov. I really like him in the fight, and I think he's a safe play. If you're thinking about cash, I think he's going to win the fight 9 out of 10 times.
Yeah, I saw someone I follow on Twitter who talks a lot about the MMA gambling side of the equation.
Yeah.
And during that Logan Storley fight, goes, you have to realize how many bettors were sweating out when they heard it's a split decision.
I was one of them, because like I'm having some great stuff come through on this parlay, and I'm like, of all people, Storley almost blew it. And the reason he almost blew is because he fatigued himself so much by facing a guy who was able to stuff some takedowns and make him work, got back to guard a lot. Storley kept passing the half guard, and then he just kept working from there. He'd get to side control and just made Storley really have to, utilize his cardio. And next thing you know, he was having a very difficult time in the matchup.
Yeah, it's one of those things of me looking. I do not recommend going back and watching that fight. First off, it was not a exciting fight at all to watch. I was sitting there, and then, but if you did stick in for that Bellator card last week, the comeback from Czech Congo there at the end, and literally, if Karatanov does not tap out with 1 second left in the second round,
what happened?
I don't know if Czech Congo makes it out for the third round.
So crazy, right? Like, it's a little bit of, we've seen Karatanov quick tap before. He's quick tapped numerous times, and Czech Congo really got him close to it, and then he tapped. That's the worst thing ever, tapping when there's 1 second left. Oh my goodness, that's got to be brutal.
To me, it was pure exhaustion in terms of, and like Czech was like just laying on the mat for like 10 minutes after that fight's over. And I'll tell you, like he took his gloves off and I'm like, hold on.
Is he retired? No, he's just tired.
Look, that was the very first thought. I mean, he's 46 years old. And so like, right. I log into the Zoom post-fight scrum and they're like, and they come on, so, oh, Czech's not going to take advantage. You know, good night, see you in a couple of weeks. And I was like, and then I just started creeping on Instagram to see, but I haven't seen anything but yeah, 46 years old, man. You're up there, man. You're up there. MMA. You can do that heavyweight.
Yeah, exactly. Age doesn't matter at heavyweight. Any other weight class, it matters.
Yeah, of course. We are sponsored by Monkey Knife Fight. With Monkey Knife Fight, you are in charge. You got to take advantage of the promo they have for the Awesemo MMA watcher. For the instant first match deposit of up to $100 when you use that promo code Awesemo. Once again, first match deposit of up to $100 when you use the promo code Awesemo. Sign up right now at monkeyknifefight.com. There are two fights I want to bring up in terms of Monkey Knife Fight. The main event is one of them, Edson Barboza versus Chikadze. Barboza 119.5, Chikadze 66.5. To me, it's a automatic more on Chikadze at 66.5, just because I believe this fight is going to go 25 minutes. Now the 119.5.
That's tough.
If you tell me that Barboza is using leg kicks frequently and often, I think you go more. But if it's a more boxing centric matchup, I might say less on 119.5.
Well, the reason I don't know if the leg kick's going to be such a tool in this match is because Chikadze really likes to fight out of the southpaw stance at times. And, Barboza would be limited to an inside kick with his rear leg, or he could be doing an outside leg kick with his front leg. But, he's kind of still stuck in the middle, getting hit with a counter shot. So I don't really know if they're not opposite stance. Well, I mean, they are opposite stance. So you might see more body kicks, more head kicks. That's tricky. I wonder if being patient and waiting a little bit, if you could get a better line on Barboza. You already know that the Chikadze line is going to get, bumped up. It's an automatic more right now on Chikadze. Yeah. But will patience boost Barboza's line higher, or will they reduce it a little bit? And maybe you can, get a better spot.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's an interesting line. Another one that kind of stuck out to me. There's two other ones that stuck out to me. The second one we'll talk later on the show because we haven't gotten to that fight yet. But Kevin Lee versus Daniel Rodriguez. Kevin Lee 64.5. Daniel Rodriguez 71.5. To me, I think the Kevin Lee number is too low. Because if he utilizes that wrestling game, he's going to land some strikes on the mat. And I just think that 64.5 is a low number, unless you think, potentially we're going to see a stoppage in the first or second round. The number on Rodriguez at 71.5, I lean going less.
You know what, Jason? I might be different than you. I might say less on Kevin Lee and more on Daniel Rodriguez. I really might, because Kevin Lee is going to, probably look to close the distance, implement takedowns. I think that some could get stuffed at times. And you already know that his cardio is not the best. So I think that his output could be affected by it. Whereas Daniel Rodriguez, if he needs to come from behind, I think that he's going to have to really up the ante and start to, throw tons of shots. So I will be opposite from what you said, oddly enough.
So we were just talking about the Czech Congo Sergey Karatanov, and we got a question from one of our viewers right now about you, Pete. He goes, This was from Joshua. Pete, would you tap or go to sleep?
Well, I think from now on, I think I'd go to sleep, to be honest.
Well, but think about it. Jornal Lugo fight against Keith Lee.
Yeah.
Basically, he goes to sleep and essentially wakes up, and a ref comes in and says, nope, it's over. You are out.
Yeah.
And I actually like that stoppage. I thought it was a good stoppage because Keith Lee had no idea where he was.
Agreed. I would agree with you. It was, remember the Dalishvili Ricky Simone fight, I believe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another one.
Similar circumstance. And, if you hear that 10-second clapper, you can't tap. You got to just try to gut, as bad as it is, as painful as it is, as much as you want to breathe. You just got to try to, gut it out. And, Karatanov's, not a legend, but is a staple for the heavyweight division. So I can't be telling him anything, but I will say that Kharitonov probably is kicking himself a little bit like, man, I should have waited, a second or two and then seeing if I was okay.
By the way, I can't help myself here as I look at the picture in your background. Who is that babyface Pete?
Yeah, man. I no facial hair and a faux hawk or a mohawk or whatever the hell I was wrecking. I don't even know. But yeah, that was a while ago, man.
Yeah, based on the logos of the Bellator cage, I'm 2013.
No, I think it was 2015.
Okay.
2014, 2015. Yeah, so about 6 years ago.
Yeah, it was a while. That was a while ago, bro. Newsflash, that was a while ago.
Yeah.
You put a picture on your Facebook memories the other day. I was like, ooh, look at Pete looking super young, like he's 16 years old.
I don't remember what I did, but yeah, man.
You were probably like 21, 22, but yeah, you had that baby face.
Yeah. I graduated high school 133 pounds and 6 feet, no facial hair. Yeah, man. We all get older, right? We lose hair from the top of our head and it goes to our face. So
yeah, 133. Have not seen that number in a long time. Long time.
Yeah, man. I haven't seen that number in a long time either, brother.
And hopefully you never see that number again.
Yeah, right.
Let's move on to the next matchup on the card. We got Alessio Di Chirico taking on Abdul Razik Al Hassan. Al Hassan is a guy that he's lost 3 in a row. He was a 2 to 3 of if you're going to put him in your lineups. I mean, you know what potentially this guy can do. I just don't know if he's going to be able to land that shot to drop Di Chirico early on in this fight. Also, the other concern I have with Al Hassan, and we've seen this in his past couple of fights, is the lack of volume.
Okay, we've seen a lot with Razak Al Hassan's previous fights, right? Lack of volume, poor fight IQ, poor wrestling defense. And, Alessio Di Chirico in his losses, he's lost some close fights, but I don't really think that Al Hassan can get Di Chirico out of there, if we're being honest. I really think that Di Chirico, outside of an Eric Spicely submission, he's lost only by decision to Boyan Velikovic, Kevin Holland, Makhmud Muradov, Zach Cummings. And he's fought some legitimate competition. I might be out of the Al Hassan business, man. I really might be out of the Al Hassan business. He's burned me too much. Yeah. And, this could be a spot where a lot of people are feeling the way I am, where they don't want to put their money behind a fighter that's let them down several times. But, maybe these early knockouts are somewhat fluky if we go back and we're kind of looking at them. He fought a 3-1 Charlie Ward, got a first round knockout. And then 2 first round knockouts over, back to back against Sabah Hamasi. And then Nico Price. The Nico Price one definitely aged well. Sabah Hamasi too, like in Bellator, has been pretty decent. But I think that's his only path to victory, and everybody knows that. He needs to keep the fight on the feet. Di Chirico will mix in takedowns when he needs to. He's done it in the past to solidify rounds. He hits really, really hard. We've seen Al Hassan knocked out. I'm leaning Di Chirico, man. He hasn't really burned me so much. He's coming off of a very, very nice knockout over Joaquin Buckley. I'm not expecting him to get a finish. I'll probably be underweight to this fight if we're being honest. The price point of Di Chirico, he needs to get a finish at 8,900, or he needs to really mollywop him with some takedowns. I don't know. I'll be slightly underweight, but I'm leaning Di Chirico to pull it off.
Well, I mean, I think that if you're looking to take a plus 8,700 and above fighter on DraftKings, I think Di Chirico is someone to look at because of a potential leverage spot that a lot of people aren't going to get there. I think you bring up a great point, potentially scoring some takedowns, secured rounds, whatnot. As I look at our ownership projections, and of course, if you want to get access to that, you can sign up for an Also Plus MMA weekly pass. It to me, Di Chirico is one of those guys in terms of those higher price options that I do think you're going to look at just to basically, help separate yourself a little bit from the field.
Yeah, I like it. And, if you're playing in tournaments, especially high stake tournaments, you have to target these spots and notice where you can get different and see what the field's doing and, zig when they zag. And that's how you end up taking down a tournament. And I will tell you that, I'm not expecting Di Chirico to have like a massive output advantage because he's not. He's pretty reserved, 3.3 strikes landed, whereas Al Hassan has slightly better at 3.7. It's just the fight IQ and the takedowns. He's Di Chirico's averaging 1.6 per fight. Not really getting him at the highest clip at 45%, but Al Hassan just seems like the fatigue gets the best of him at times. And in addition to that, when you see a fighter like, yes, some fighters need to make adjustments and changes to training camps, but they like leave camps to go here and there thinking that that's going to solve problems. I'm not buying it. I'm really not buying it. I'm back into Chirico.
Next up, we have got Sam Alvey taking on Wellington Thurman. Wellington Thurman, 8,400. Sam Alvey is 7,800. And one of the props that stuck out to me, and I know I should not feel good about this one, Sam Alvey via TKO KO plus 275. I mean, look, Sam Alvey, no one is ever going to say Sam Alvey equals volume striker because that's just not Sam Alvey's game. Here's what's, I'm not a psychic, but here's what I feel pretty confident in saying. Sam Alvey will find his back up against the fence. He will gladly put his own back up against the fence and basically wait for Wellington Thurman to throw a punch. Wellington Thurman, to me, the path is to take this matchup to the ground. But the one thing that's always frustrates the hell out of you if you're a Sam Alvey backer is it's like Tyron Woodley. Woodley would always put his back right up against the fence. And man, I just hated it.
Oh, 100%. And where you start to see fighters fight like a shell in themselves and not make adjustments from fight to fight. Like, you don't think that Sam Alvey's looked at fight tape and been like, maybe I shouldn't put my back against the cage, but it's like execution where fight after fight, it's just habit and they do it over and over and over. And, it's bailed them out a few times where they put their back against, they land a big shot. And next thing you know, they turn the tide of the fight and they ended up being victorious. I think that, Sam Alvey is an interesting underdog. And another fighter that I'm going to look to get to, Sam Alvey is 7,800. And I think that he can knock out Wellington Thurman because Thurman's been knocked out in back-to-back fights against Andrew Sanchez and then against Silva. And Silva one was a little interesting because it was on the mat where he was on bottom. His bottom hand was kind of trapped under the leg, looking like he was going for, either a sweep or trying to attempt an arm bar. And then, he was defenseless and ended up getting caught some shots. Sam Alvey typically has good takedown defense, limited output, power in both hands. Not really something that you want to hear when Wellington Thurman's been, knocked out in back-to-back fights. Wellington Thurman's game is to implement takedowns and, be a little suffocating with the pace and all of that. I don't know, man. Sam Alvey needs this win to walk away, to possibly get an extension on his deal or stay in the UFC, because if he doesn't win, he's out of the UFC. He's had some close fights against a lot more dangerous opponents than Wellington Thurman. So I'm back in Sam Alvey, 7,800. I hate saying that. It's 2021, but I have to do it. I have to do it.
Yeah, I think that we are both going to be similar to a lot of people that are going to be looking at Sam Alvey going, man, don't feel good about it. But if he does get it, you would imagine it's going to be via stoppage there. I do think Sam Alvey as a FanDuel play at $15 could be very interesting because I do expect that he is going to have to stop takedowns, and he has shown good takedown defense. Next up, we have got a matchup. We got Dustin Jacoby taking on Darren Stewart. Jacoby 8,800, 7,400 for Darren Stewart. Heading into this week, Dustin Jacoby was someone I was thinking of. That price tag scares me though.
It does scare me for DFS, but I really like Dustin Jacoby. I think he's a better betting piece and possibly over on FanDuel than on DraftKings. 8,800. We've seen him. He touches people up from the outside, has great leg kicks, former glory kickboxer. But, we've seen him come back to MMA and he's looked good. I think that he got ragdolled somewhat against, Ian Cutelaba. And that's always worrisome, especially when you're going up against a guy that can implement some takedowns. But I don't really hold Darren Stewart to the same grappling or wrestling pedigree that I do Cutelaba. I don't hold Darren Stewart to the same degree that I hold Max and Grecian. I think that Dustin Jacoby walks away victorious 8 out of 10 times. I really like him in this spot. I think he's a cash piece. He could work towards a finish here against Darren Stewart because we've seen Stewart get finished a decent amount where like he'll get caught with subs, even get caught with some big shots and get rocked. I am foreseeing this going the distance, but I really like Dustin Jacoby a lot as far as he's going to win this fight.
Yeah, I was kind of, when I was looking at the prop bets, I was kind of looking that Jacoby wins round 3. I mean, now Stewart at 205, yeah, as opposed to 185. But I do feel that Jacoby is the right side to play in this matchup. It's a price tag situation of can I fit Dustin Jacoby in at 8,800. Now, of course, before we move on to the next matchup, do want to let you know about a promo that we got going on right now over at Awesemo.com. It's our early bird Awesemo Plus NFL annual pass, as you can right now can get 15% off with the promo code Blitz. That's a full season worth of Awesemo Plus player projections, ownership projections, top stacks, premium stacks, and a ton of new additions for this NFL season. As an added bonus, this also includes projections and updated depth charts all preseason long. That's promo code Blitz for 15% off Awesemo Plus NFL annual. Just click the link in the description of this video to activate it. Yeah, you got to be paying attention to those depth charts, as the big cut down is coming up here just in a couple of days as we go from 80 to 53. And then 16 come back on the practice squad.
Yeah, right. Man. It's the cuts are always weird, but then their phones ring off the hook of come back in for this and that. But it's always interesting, especially like if you're watching these behind the scenes shows and you get attached to certain players and then you see them get cut or not make it, and you're like, man, you feel for these athletes, and feels like you're back in high school running to the list to see who made the team and who didn't.
It's always, I remember just back in the day, like you would hear players, they would say, who's the Turk? Who's the Turk? The guy that's going to say, hey, bring your playbook. The coach needs to see you. Yeah. And I remember I knew who it was. And I remember saying something to him, and he's like, yeah, man, people are starting to figure out that I'm the guy. Because you see it on Hard Knocks so many times of like, hey, bring your playbook because the head coach wants to see you, which you pretty much, what that means in terms of there. But yeah, you got to take advantage of that Blitz promo we got going over there at Awesemo.com. 3 more matchups to break down here. We've got a female matchup, JJ Aldrich and Vanessa Donopoulos. Vanessa 7,100, JJ Aldrich 9,100. Vanessa stepping in here for Tracy Cortez, who pulled out of the matchup. And I mean, look, it's you have a sizable reach advantage here for JJ Aldrich in terms of this one. I will tell you this, the Demopoulos via submission prop, which is 14-1, is a juicy prop. If somehow she is going to pull this one off, to me, it will be via submission. I spoke to her last Friday. We spoke at 11 a.m. Pete. She was supposed to be in the LFA card on Friday. And then about 3 hours after we get done with the interview, her management hits me up, goes, hey, are you going to release that Vanessa interview today? I go, no, it's coming out Sunday on the podcast. I go, well, that's good because she's in the UFC.
Crazy, right? Things happen fast, man, especially when you're staying ready and you're booked for a fight and people drop off, and the UFC's looking for replacements. And I will tell you that Vanessa Demopoulos is a legitimate replacement. She really is. She's exciting. She has excellent jiu-jitsu, and I think that's where she could pull off the victory here. I think that prop bet is a wise bet, especially because that's her path to victory. And if there's ever been an armbar from guard possibility, I think that Vanessa Demopoulos can pull it off. So don't be surprised if Demopoulos pulls off the armbar from guard, but JJ Aldrich will probably be wise to it. And, at 9,100, I don't know if I'll get there. Honestly, I think that she's going to win the fight. I think she's going to be able to, pick her apart in the stand-up, defend some takedowns, just kind of outclass her and show her that she's fought some legitimate competition that's kind of prepared her for a situation like this and a fighter like this, especially one making their UFC debut. JJ Aldrich, she's going to have a pretty sizable reach advantage in this matchup, which kind of threw me for a loop. 8-inch reach advantage, 67 inches compared to Demopoulos' 59. Demopoulos' striking defense is not the best, and I think JJ Aldrich can kind of light her up like a Christmas tree. If somehow she gets rock dropped, falls on her back, and Aldrich follows her to the mat, that's where things can get troublesome. So that's the game of MMA, right? Where, a fighter at 7,100 can pull off this submission and end up getting a victory when they were losing the fight. So I will have some limited exposure to Demopoulos just based on that narrative and that path to victory. But I think Aldrich wins this fight 8 out of 10 times. And I'm pretty confident in saying that. 9,100, just not a salary I really want to get to, though.
Yeah, I agree with you there in terms of JJ Aldrich. I do think she's going to win this matchup. It should be noted that, a big part of the conversation I had with Vanessa was about changes that she has made. She has literally changed everything in her fight game. She left California, moved to Arizona, and you want to know who one of the fighters she's trained with recently?
Who?
Tracy Cortez.
Ha! Isn't that funny how it works?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, there's a reason JJ Aldrich is approaching a 4-1 betting favorite in this one. But if Vanessa's going to win, it's her using her jiu-jitsu to potentially get a submission or maybe a finish there. But this should be a win there by JJ Aldrich. Next up, we got Jamal Emmers and Pat Sabatini. Pat Sabatini is one of these underdogs I'm targeting, Pete.
Interesting. And, I do like Pat Sabatini. I like the camp that he comes from, Renzo Gracie, Philly. I know the head coach, Daniel Gracie, there. And, all those guys are really well prepared. You've seen like Sean Brady, all these guys that come from there. They're so well prepared. They have strong jiu-jitsu, just good everywhere. And I think that this is a very winnable fight for Pat Sabatini. But if I go back and I look at his UFC debut, I'm a little surprised at the lack of activity in the stats. I mean, listen to this. It was a unanimous decision for Pat Sabatini. He landed 26 significant strikes, 1 takedown, 1 knockdown. Tristan Connolly landed 19 significant strikes and 1 takedown. That's in a 3-round fight, Jason. It's just so very, very weird. And that's where you talk about fighters kind of like nullifying each other's strengths of, who has decent takedown defense and this and that. I will say that Jamal Emmers has an extreme volume advantage, but it's based on the small sample size of Pat Sabatini's debut and Jamal Emmers only having a few fights in the UFC. But yeah, I'll rattle them off. 5.75 significant strikes per minute for Jamal Emmers in comparison to Pat Sabatini's 1.7. So those numbers are not the best. I do think that Jamal Emmers has good enough wrestling to keep this upright for the most part. He tends to initiate the takedowns, and we've seen it against Vince Cachero, scoring 5. He lost a close fight to Giga Chikadze on the contender series. Actually was knocked out by Julian Erosa, which kind of surprised a lot of people in that matchup. But I am siding with Jamal Emmers. I understand the Pat Sabatini love, 7,900. He's a phenomenal BJJ practitioner and can definitely work some submissions into this fight and possibly pull off the upset. I think stand up, I think Emmers will have the advantage. And at 8,300, this is a fight where I don't know if production really comes because they're just both so talented. I'm okay with getting away from this fight for most of my lineups, but I am siding with Emmers.
Pete, I'm going to tell you something that's going to shock you.
All right, let's hear it.
I'm targeting someone in the first fight of the night.
Okay. I do think the first fight of the night is very volatile and probably going to be, a part of the optimal lineup. But let's hear it, Jason.
Mana Martinez. Now, if you've been a watcher of myself and Pete here for a long time, you may remember I brought his name up a couple weeks ago when Adrian Yanez took on Randy Costa. Mana Martinez was Adrian Yanez's main sparring partner to get ready for Randy Costa. He is a striker. Look, if Guido is going to pull this off, to me, it's about utilizing takedowns to take Mana down. Yeah. Now, what is interesting also kind of, inside the fight game here is Saul Solis, who passed away 2 weeks ago. That was Mana Martinez's head coach, of course, the head coach of Adrian Yanez as well. So this will be his first fight without his head coach here. So I think that's something there, but I do like this matchup here for Mana Martinez.
That's such a difficult thing to deal with, right? Because you have to balance your emotions. And I've mentioned it on the show in the past, and I'm going to bring it up now again, is when Mark Hominick lost his coach and went through with the fight with the Korean Zombie. And he went out there to, release all that anger and sadness and all that emotion. And he, ended up getting clipped and dropped and finished against the Korean Zombie very early because he was fighting emotional. You do wonder if Martinez does pull that same card. I think that just in general, he's a very aggressive striker and he possesses power in each strike that he throws, which is not good for Guido Canetti, who is aging. And in his losses, he's been rocked, dropped, knocked down, knocked out, and, been hurt plenty of times. And he's been submitted as well. So I do think that Mana Martinez needs to defend takedowns, which I think Guido Canetti is going to be shooting early and often. And I will say that this fight will be a part of the optimal lineup. Mana Martinez is one of my favorite fighters on the entire slate. I like him a lot. But as far as a contrarian approach, Guido Canetti is the UFC vet. He has, solid wrestling and jiu-jitsu. 7,200. If he's able to get Mana Martinez down and possibly work towards a submission or, I don't think he's going to be able to last 3 rounds with Mana Martinez. He needs to try to submit him. I think that's like a 20% outcome. Mana Martinez is going to knock him out in this fight, in my opinion. So 9,000, I'm backing Martinez quite a bit.
Of course, coming up next is MLB Deeper Dive, followed by MLB Live Before Lock. Of course, we'll get a couple things in here before we get out of here. Of course, be sure to subscribe also right here on YouTube. Hit that thumbs up, hit that notification bell. That really does help us a lot as well. Let's go through quickly our straight up fight picks here. I will go Edson Barboza, Brian Battle, Brady Heinstead, Kevin Lee, Andre Petrosky, Mahmoud Amiradov, Alessio Di Chirico, Sam Alvey, Dustin Jacoby, JJ Aldrich, Pat Sabatini, and Mana Martinez.
All right. I will go Edson Barboza, Brian Battle, Brady Heinstead, Daniel Rodriguez, Andre Petrosky, Mahmoud Muradov, Alessio Di Chirico, Sam Alvey, Dustin Jacoby, JJ Aldrich, Jamal Emmers, and Mana Martinez.
And let's get Sam's super chat, and then we'll get out of here. Sam's usual questions. First up, we'll go top 2 cash.
I would say top 2 cash. I will go Andre Petrosky and Mahmoud Muradov.
Top G2 GPPs.
I will say Petrosky and Mana Martinez.
Yeah, I would agree with you on there. In terms of underdogs, to me, I'm looking at Sam Alvey as one of them. Pat Sabatini is another underdog, and Brady Heinstead to me is another underdog to target there. In terms of MVPs, I will tell you, I'm looking at Mana Martinez as an MVP. Muradov, I think, is another kind of, because especially on the FanDuel side of the equation, he's going to stop takedowns, potentially gets a stoppage. I think that's someone that you got to target there when we're talking about MVP as well. To me, leverage plays, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, Alessio Di Chirico, I think is a leverage play in terms of their, of course, armbar from guard. We've already mentioned that one with Vanessa Nonopoulos. We've already talked about first fight night in Optimal. We mentioned that as well. I think there's some other fights. I think you got Muradov Mearshart, I think, is another one in terms of, I think the winner of that one ends up Optimal. Anything else you want to mention here with what Sam had to his questions?
No, I think that for me, the underdogs, I like Brady Heinstead and Daniel Rodriguez. Overall, I think the fights to target Kevin Lee, Daniel Rodriguez, the first fight of the night. I think that those two are very, very important. And I'm excited for this card, Jason. And, thank you guys so much for all the support. If you can hit that thumbs up button, we really do appreciate it. I will be back on Saturday. I'm excited for this. And yeah.
I will not be here. Well, I'll be on Saturday for the NASCAR show. Will not be here for the Live Before Lock. So, but we'll be back next week for the strategy show. Of course, coming up next is MLB Deeper Dive, as Eric and Adam will get you ready for tonight's MLB slate. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Awesemo MMA Strategy Show. Good luck on Saturday with your lineups, and I will talk to you again next week on the Awesemo MMA Strategy Show. Good afternoon, everybody.